Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I'm Jody Grunwald. This week, my guest is Sally Glick, Principal and Chief Growth Strategist for Sobel Co. Sally is an incredible connector. Listen to hear how early on in her life, at the young age of just 9 or 10, her dad, who had a business, gave her some fun responsibilities to help him. That trust led Sally to where she is today. She shares how the not-for-profit and for-profit sectors can work better together, the importance of mentorship, and so many more lessons. You can learn more about Sobel Co. by going to Sobel Co. LLC, that's SOBELCOLLC.com. Please subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Download the podcast from most streaming sites. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day, Live It. Also, to learn more about Today is the Day's overall programming, International Annual Forum, the upcoming Changemakers Connective, business coaching and consulting, go to todayisthedayliveit.com. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Thank you and have a fabulous week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and every single week I always say the same thing. I get to interview the changemakers, the inspirers, those that are disrupting the status quo in the best way possible in their communities. And today I have Sally Glick with me. Hi, Sally.
Good morning, Jody. It's great to see you.
It's so great to see you, and I'm glad we're finally doing this. This is so
We've talked about it for a long time.
We have. So thank you for being on. And I'm going to do what I always do, Sally. I read a little bit from your bio, and then we're going to get into our conversation.
Okie doke.
So Sally Glick here in New Jersey is very well known because she's done incredible work, but her bio goes on to share a little bit more than just that. She's the principal of the firm and chief growth strategist at Sobel Co. In that role, she is responsible for the development and implementation of the firm's branding, marketing communications, and functions as an ambassador to the community, driving their business development strategies. Sally serves on several nonprofit and business boards and committees, including as the board member and immediate past president of the Association for Corporate Growth New Jersey, chair of the New Jersey District Export Council, board member of Commerce and Industry Association of New Jersey, as well as a participant on several CIA NJ committees, co-chair of the Morris County Chamber of Commerce Nonprofit Council, previous board member and executive board member for the Center for Nonprofits, and advisory board member for the Great Swamp Watershed Association. I'm not done yet. I just want to list a few more things. Has proudly earned recognition as one of ROI NJ Women of Influence in 2022 and Power 50 in the 2021 NJ Biz counting list, as well as recognition as one of the top women on the 2021 ROI NJ list. And the list goes on, including New Jersey Ed Club Hall of Fame and so much more. I promised Sally I wouldn't read all of her bio, but boy, I could go on and on, Sally. How incredible. What a career.
Well, I worked hard at it. I love helping. It's ingrained in me. That was my father. He did the same. And when you do work hard, people recognize it. So you get a lot of opportunities.
Well, you absolutely have worked hard, and you've all of those, titles and awards and all the things so well earned. And we'll go through some of that really, really shortly. But there's so much I myself don't even know about you, like where you grew up. So let's go back to young Sally for a few minutes.
Yeah. First you have to be able to remember that, which is always a fun challenge. But I've had a really wonderful life. When I was just finishing college, really, I'm in skip grammar school, mercifully. It was fun. And you might expect this, Jody, but when it came time to do this for the senior prom, I was the co-chair. Right. I think I was always typecast as the person that would raise their hand and say, I'll do that event. So I had fun. When we do a reunion, I'm often shocked when fellow classmates will say, I don't want to come. I didn't like high school. I just think, how could you not have liked high school? How did I miss that? Why didn't I help you more? Because it was so much fun. So I enjoyed high school, grammar school, whatever. But when I got done with college, my father, who was an accountant and a solo practitioner, said, I have time to serve more clients, but not time to find them. and I have this really great idea. Why don't you go out and, go to the Chamber of Commerce? We lived in Chicago, go to the Chicago Chamber of Commerce. There was a downtown business group. Many of the smaller banks, had they weren't webinars, sorry, they were seminars at the time. And he said, mix and mingle and see what you can do about drumming up some business. We kind of created that role for ourselves. Years later, I discovered the American Marketing Association, and then ultimately the Association of Accounting Marketers also was created. But we did that, all of the things we did before that happened. So I was kind of preconditioned that this was going to be my world. And here I am, sort of jokingly, 50 years later, chief growth strategist, which means I never actually left my original job. And I've loved it always. My dad, who he would have been 80, he was 88 when he died. He died about 5 years ago. And he was still, though, very cognizant. It wasn't like he had no intellectual issues. And so when I would be on a cover of something, or if I was on a seminar, he would listen in and he'd say, "You stole that idea from me. We did that in 1972. And I would say, "Not much change, Dad. It's okay, So I've just always been on this path. It isn't like I had like great ambitions to be a nurse or a doctor or travel the world. I just really always loved building the business and making connections. And my dad did that. And again, we didn't call him the connector. We didn't use the word networker. I'd have to Google and see, when did the word networking, not for IT, but for people, become a famous word, or a much used word in the vocabulary, because we didn't know that. We just did it. And it worked for us. And as a sole practitioner, he built an entire $1 million practice by virtue of creating connections in the community and making himself well known and having me handle that, kind of take the ball and run with it. When I look back now, I was in my 20s and he trusted me to represent him in the community and to speak articulately and to say, "Oh, my dad would be happy to do that seminar. Let's come in and talk about how to read a financial statement or how you start a business." He did all those talks for entrepreneurs because he himself was basically an entrepreneur, and he wasn't so out of touch and so big or part of such a large organization that he couldn't relate to the smaller business owners. And there are many more small business owners than there are large corporations. So we had a really great opportunity in Chicago to do that.
So you were in Chicago?
I was in Chicago. I'm here since 2002. So I'm here 20 years exactly.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, so you grew up in Chicago. That's where you were born and raised.
South Side. Yeah, and so just White Sox all the way. Nobody can make a mistake and say Cubs or anything. Definitely Chicago South Side.
I love that. And, I totally relate with that connection with your dad. That definitely, my dad was my mentor as well. And it's a special time when you're connecting on something on a different level, a professional level, but yet there's that kindness and love and nurturing that comes with it.
Right.
So I guess when he came to you and said, "Hey, I have this great idea," was your first reaction to that, "Oh, I love that idea"? Or did you think to yourself, "Wow, that I'm kind of still a little green. I'm a little nervous about this"? What were your thoughts?
So you use some really great adjectives when you said you work with a family member, particularly a father. And one of the words that I would add to that is trust. And so he just always trusted me. And I actually didn't start it totally at the beginning because I said we didn't need to really deal with grammar school and high school. The reality was, as a sole practitioner, for many years, his office was in our basement, the finished basement, and he made that into his office. So when I came home from school every day, my job was to go over to the Pitney Bowes machine. Believe it or not, that's how old Pitney Bowes is. And do the mail for the day, right? As he was putting things out, he would stack them up and I would come in and shoot it. We didn't put stamps on. We shot them through the Pitney Bowes machine, or he had a photocopy machine. It was with the filings and all. It was a messy kind of an operation, but he would leave me stacks of stuff and say, "I need photocopies of each of these for files," or whatever, and I would do that. Anyone who's ever worked in an accounting or law firm knows the library is important. So he received CCH, Commerce Clearinghouse, packets every day. They would be marked at the bottom, "These replace pages 102 and 105. And you'd open the binder, take out 102 and 105 and put in the new ones, close the binder and move on. And he'd get a stack and he'd hold them for me for a week. And my job was to take out the outdated information, put in the new information. you didn't have Google. You didn't get the newest, freshest information when you went. It was printed and it had to be, obsolete and then move on to something new. So I had all those part-time jobs. It never occurred to me to work anywhere but with my father. So from a very young age, we only made one mistake ever. I think I must have been about 9. And he had me stuffing envelopes for one of our clients. We did, it was a pediatrician, and we did their billing for them. So we were sending out the invoices to the patients, and I had them in upside down. So everything was returned to the return address because you couldn't see through the window who was receiving the mail. And the return address, of course, was the physician's office. So one day they were mailed out, and the next day they were all returned. And I called my dad and said, the envelopes were inside out. And my father's like, we'll take care of that. So clearly I was allowed a few mistakes at the age of 10 when I did a billing, but I think that's the only one that I ever remember my father talking about. So I doubt that it was the only mistake I ever made, but I think I was the youngest when I made that mistake. So, but I always worked with him, Jody, and it just was a sensible thing to say, now you're grown up and now I need you at a different level. I need you to interact in the community in a way that I know you can. And he just set me free.
Such empowerment in that, and in the way that I know you can. I mean, that what a great support system there. Him saying that to you, and starting at such a young age. I mean, the grooming and the learning. We don't realize how much of a sponge. I wish to this day I could be that much of a sponge as we were at 10 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be awesome? But all of those little teachings about how to fold those things and put them in the right way, just really, we don't realize what that's doing for us.
The other thing was I grew up in an accounting world, and I have to say that gives me an edge. So almost all of my colleagues are on the marketing side, growth side, law firms, accounting firms, any kind of professional service marketer comes in with marketing skills, which at the time there wasn't really a class to go to school and learn how to be an accounting firm marketer. No one ever even heard the expression, but what I did get was a lot of interaction on the accounting firm side. So when we're talking to a client, I have that extra insight that talks about a billable hour, the functioning of an accounting firm, and the differences between professional services marketing, which is intangible, product marketing, which is clearly tangible and much more common, branding, and all the things that you do when you have a product or a place as opposed to, a service. And it gave me such insight. I would hear my dad talking to clients who were perhaps in manufacturing, or the pediatrician, or anyone that owned a restaurant, and he would talk about tables turning, and he would talk about minimum wage, because of course, wait staff gets a very small minimum wage, but they make the money up on tips. And how do you account for that? So when I'm writing information for a client, or we're talking about today a webinar or a blog or something that we're addressing to our clients, I have a little more knowledge about those industries than I might ever have had I not started with my father. If I just started in marketing, I could read about it and learn about it and read our own website to get insights into the niche focus. But I grew up in that, and it's really been very helpful. I always tease I can play a CPA on TV. I'm not one, but I can pretend I am for a short period of time.
Isn't that great? It's just it's so incredible. I love hearing stories like this. I've grew up with this too, because my father was always in sales. So he worked with manufacturer reps, and I never realized, and I saw how he connected with them in a non-salesy way, right? In a way that was all about connecting with the human, not what he was going to be able to get out of the order, the potential order that he would be able to get out of them. And I think that now that you're speaking about it, really helped to groom me. And we just don't realize the grooming that is going on, and hopefully in such a good way. So then after working for your dad and growing his business and doing all of that wonderful connecting, what was next on your career path?
So at some point, of course, he decided to retire, and I had the good fortune of knowing a lot of people in the Chicago marketplace because of my dad. And we did some things that we're still doing today. And I just want to sneak that in before I say what I have been lucky enough to do today. So when he and I would be talking about interacting with a client base, we would talk about, and this was in the 70s, what can we give them? What can we share with them? What do they need? So he would talk to me, let's say, about sales tax, or the difference between sales tax and use tax. And I would write that up, and we would put it on nice stationery, and I would take it to the local printer. And we had a book called Clip Art, anyone who uses clip art today may not know this, but you actually clipped it at one time. It was a book, like a cartoon, like a comic book, and you clipped out pictures or things to embellish your design work. Because you didn't have a computer, you didn't actually design anything in an office. So we put, different items around the border and make it attractive looking. And then we would take it to a printer and they would print it on good stock. And then we would literally either mail it or hand deliver it to our clients. So we were kind of the forerunners of creating newsletters. Many years later in the 90s, when I continued my career without my dad, one of the places I worked wrote and published newsletters on behalf of CPA firms, which they then sent to their own clients. So here I have been in the business community for about 50 some years, and I'm still editing or writing or helping our firm with its newsletters. Now they're electronically delivered and other people write them and I might edit, but it's always strikes me as so funny that everything changed. And at the end of the day, not much changed at all. So when my dad did decide to retire, there were several companies in the Chicago area, one in particular that did create all kinds of marketing niche specific materials. Then they sold it to a CPA firm and you had exclusivity. So you didn't see your materials coming and going across the area that you own. So if you were a New Jersey firm, you were, let's say, Sobel, and your office was in Livingston and your marketplace was the state of New Jersey, and you wanted manufacturing information, you could buy the newsletter, buy the ad campaigns. You didn't have to do all that yourself, put your name and logo on it, but they also wouldn't sell it to anybody else in New Jersey. So you had a fairly good shot at no one else seeing another accounting firm mailing to your clients the same newsletter, as you didn't say you wrote it, but you were sending it to people on your behalf. So it sort of implied that this was, information you were sharing. But if you had a niche, you wanted to be the expert in that niche. So you wanted to send newsletters to manufacturers about inventory or supply chain. You wanted to send to nonprofits. You wanted to talk about, having your board chair and your executive director able to put together agendas, whatever the topics were. And there was always 4 articles. They were produced quarterly, and they would literally have your logo and your name on it, and they would be sent to you, and then you could do with them what you wanted. So we mailed them to clients or could hand deliver them, whatever you wanted. So I went there. And the only reason I'm even explaining that I went to that role immediately after my dad was one of our clients was headquartered in Atlanta, and it was an association of accounting firms, and they represented the whole association, and we did the newsletters for all those members. One of those members was here in New Jersey. So when I stopped work with my dad and I worked for the company that did the newsletters, I was recruited by this Atlanta organization, and they said, would you come to Atlanta? We'd love you to be part of the back office and be a resource for all our members. And I'd never left Chicago. I'm the 3rd generation. My grandparents, my parents, myself, all born there, and all Southsiders. And I was a little nervous about leaving, but it sounded like something that would be really enticing. So I did move to Atlanta. And when I was there about 2 or 3 months, the Vidir Group, which some people may remember as a CPA firm in Parsippany, ultimately they merged with J.H. Cohn. But they were independent, they were in Parsippany, and they started calling me and saying, you're a great resource and we're thrilled that you're with the association, but we'd like to move you to New Jersey and we'd like you to work directly for us, not as a resource through this group that we belong to. And I said, no, I've just moved here. I'm here 2 or 3 months. I really getting my feet wet. I'm really excited. It's nice to talk to firms all across the country. I am a resource for you. Call me for anything. And I'm not moving from Chicago to Atlanta only to pick up and move to New Jersey. Plus, if you've ever lived through a Chicago winter, you know that Atlanta was a pretty nice deal. So when you're at 45 degrees in the middle of February instead of 45 below zero, it's someplace you're not in such a big hurry to leave. It's not that hasty. But ultimately, over time, my youngest son finished up at Cornell and went to work at J&J in New Jersey. And he and his wife stayed in New Jersey. So then I got the call again saying, hey, look, we know there's a hook here. You've got your son in New Jersey. We're still here. We're still looking for you. So I did ultimately leave the association, although retained to this day, very close ties. I do a lot of different things. And Sobel, because life is funny, ended up as a member of the association. So sometimes I'm asked to speak an event or something, and I go there, and I have seen these people for the last 30 years have been a part of my life. It's kind of fun. And I did go to work at the Vidier Group. They ultimately were merged into J.H. Cohn. I was not comfortable in that bigger environment. I love hands-on, and I like making a difference, but knowing I'm making a difference and knowing that my presence is the distinguishing factor. And J.H. Cohn, they're so big, and now they're Cohn Resnick, but they're so powerful and had so much to offer, but a smaller firm would need me more. And I bumped into Alan Sobel, who was at the time considering joining the organization that I'd come from. And we were talking about it. And I said, do you have a marketing director? And he said, no, we're only about 40, 60 people. We don't need a marketing director yet. And I said, how will you get to 80 without one? And by the way, my father was an office of two people, and one was me, the marketing director, and one was him as the accountant. So you're never too small. And they hired me, and I've been there ever since. That was 2005. I came here in 2002. I was here 3 years with the Vidier Group, and it's J.H. Cohn when it became the successor to that. And then I came straight to the Sobel office, and I've been happily ensconced there ever since. So I've not had very many jobs in my lifetime.
No, you haven't. I'm just sitting there doing the math, sitting here doing the math and thinking to myself, that's incredible. You haven't. Your loyalties, and if you're happy, it's awesome to be able to say, and you don't hear it as much anymore, right? I feel like people move around a lot more now than they
You're
did
kind of
years ago.
encouraged to, someone looks at your resume and you've been somewhere 20 years. So a new person coming in kind of wonders, why did you stay, or did you stagnate? I always felt I learned a little more. I did spend so many years with my dad, but was able to parlay that into working at the newsletters, the association that created newsletters and other marketing materials, and then ultimately the association in Atlanta, the Vidier Group, and then Sobel. So those two firms are connected by, three of them are all connected to each other, the association and then ultimately the individual firms. And that also gave me a bit more of a national platform, because as a part of the association, we would be at, our members were everywhere across the country, and we would be at AICPA events and other things that really were well beyond a regional presence. And that, again, introduced me to different people, just as my father had introduced me to so many people around Chicago. Working at the association gave me the chance to have a wider breadth and a bigger geographic footprint, which I learned so much. Firms in Seattle were doing things differently than firms in New Jersey. And so it was a great exposure for me.
Now, I would like to have your father's name on here, because we've mentioned your father so many times.
So he's Harold, 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 and my maiden name was Leftwich. Just like it sounds, Lef like Frank, T like Tom, Wich. I can still hear my mother when she'd make a reservation for dinner, or she'd be on the phone, she'd say Lef as in Frank, T as in Tom, Wich. And I find myself saying it, but I also hear other cousins of mine sometimes saying it. I'm thinking everybody's parents probably all said the same thing without even knowing they were doing it. Whenever we have a reunion or do anything as cousins, we laugh that we still are describing ourselves in the exact way that our parents and grandparents did.
Oh, absolutely. That absolutely happens. And what I love to do too is, I feel like when you say someone's name and you share their learnings and their teachings, that's how we keep them alive, right?
Absolutely. And he knew that always, that he'd say, well, what you should have said? You should have said this, or I heard you on that call, or I saw you in this magazine. And occasionally he would come to events that were like from the Accounting and Marketing Association, and so that he could walk around and see everybody. And he was like the original marketer. He just really was. He just made up his mind. He didn't know. We had no clue that what was coming in terms of technology. He didn't say, I need a website, I need social media, I need to be sure to be creating a newsletter that can be delivered by email. All he knew was that you needed to connect with people and add value and help them because you understood their world. So he was kind of already in the process of creating niches and segments, and in a way that most general practitioners don't do. They kind of know a lot about a little about a lot, which is great. There is a need for that. But he really started specializing pretty early on in his career and had various vertical markets that he served in a more meaningful way than other, sole practitioners might have done.
Now, I want to talk to our audience for a minute about the fact that you were so lucky. I was so lucky to have someone there who was supportive and trusted you. My dad trusted me. Not everybody has that role model to turn to that, is going to be supportive and your cheerleader. What advice do you have, and I'm talking about the professional starting right now or mid-career, and sometimes we all need the cheerleader. It doesn't matter where we are within our careers. What advice do you have for someone who's feeling like they really wish they had someone, and how do they find that person?
So it's a really great question. And your point about starting with my father gave me obviously a lead that other people wouldn't have had, sort of like having the right pole position. It's a lot easier when you're starting out on a different course. But at the end of the day, I've had some amazing opportunities, and I'm ending my career equally moving toward ending my career, not ending my career, moving towards ending my career in a way that is equally as exciting and dynamic, fun, and trusted as I started it, because that's how it is with the partners at Sobel Co., and the tone starts at the top. So if I had met Alan Sobel somewhere else and had talked to him about becoming his marketing director when I was looking around for opportunities to stay in New Jersey and not leave, he struck me as the kind of person I would like to work with. He was telling me about he was playing April Fool's jokes on the firm, and some that he had done in previous years. We were talking about being fun at work. No one had ever heard the word intentional culture. We never had the word DE&I, but Alan Sobel knew way ahead of his time that you have to make the office place pleasant, fun, and warm and welcoming. And I was thinking to myself as I was looking at him, here's a managing partner of a firm who makes time for April Fool's jokes. When is April 1st? When is tax season? April 15th. You couldn't pick a more stressful time to be laying awake at night thinking of something funny you could do to catch your staff off guard, right? And I just thought, this is the kind of guy I want to work for. And so it is true, you can look, you need to be self-aware. You need to know the kinds of things that matter most to you, almost where you make your own plan. You have a strategic plan for yourself, just like you would for your organization. What are my strengths? What are the things I need improving? From my strengths, what opportunities might I be able to develop? Who do I know in the market that can introduce me? So if I trust you and your judgment, I might say to you, Jody, I'm looking to make a change. And I know that you too like a nice culture or care about warmth and friendliness and camaraderie. Do you know anyone? Because I trust your judgment. And so if I like A and A likes B, the chances are I'm also going to be comfortable with B as well. So it's about building a network around yourself so that you're never really alone. It may not be your father with his ultimate trust. And my mother used to say, if he was ever angry with me, don't worry, honey, he'll never fire you. So rarely do you have your mother as the HR director going to bat and saying, take it whatever she's dishing out because you're not coming home tonight if she's not employed, right? So those circumstances are far and few between, but the ability to give your all and raise your hand and say, yes, I'll do that, to be engaged and passionate, that's contagious. And people want to be with you as much as you want to be with them. And so I think you need to talk to people and be in different groups and be aware of the people around you and how you fit in with that. But I have often said someone, especially marketing, professional services has come a long way now, but it wasn't early on a particularly well-respected career. Accountants love to say that, as they should, that what sells the most, of course, is their expertise. People use them because they're great, not because they put a wonderful post up or because they're in Facebook or on Instagram, but it's their services that sell. And they're correct about that, of course. But if it's a well-kept secret, then you don't sell nearly in the way that you would if you had marketing support. So I've had young people come to me in some more seasons saying, I work at a firm that just doesn't respect me or has my hands handcuffed. I can't get more done. And I always say, you have two choices in life, always. You can stay and make it better. You can go. If this is an environment that is never going to work for you, and if you bang your head against the wall and you are still not going to be well-regarded, well-respected, used in a meaningful fashion, you'll find something else where someone does appreciate what you've got. So you're never stuck. That's the first thing. I think we feel sort of stuck, and depending on your financial situation, you might be some people more stuck than others. I have 3 children. I'm a single parent. I can't really afford to move around too much, and I need this job. But if you pour your heart and soul into something, more often than not, even if someone else isn't praising you, you know you're doing your very best, and you know that you're making a difference and having a positive impact. That alone is often enough. It's wonderful when someone else appreciates that, comments on it publicly, privately, whatever it may be. But sometimes everyone's not as ebullient as somebody else. And you might have a managing partner or a director in your organization that pats you on the head and says, great job. And you may do the very same job and someone else doesn't even acknowledge it, but you know about it. And you have to find other places to get that satisfaction if it's not coming, from the person that it would be nice if it did. And you can even have those conversations as you've been around a long time and been around long enough to have made an impression and shown your value, is to say, it would help me if you tell me if this is within your, if you like this. No one's ever, ever, ever too secure or too old to not need being told, good job. I love it when someone says, that was great. I'm so glad you did that. Thank you. I'm not too old to want a pat on the head. And I think everyone does too. You never get, even when you're at the very top, it's nice when someone says to the CEO, I'm glad I work for you. I'm glad I work with you. You really set a great tone. No one's ever tired of that.
Yeah.
So
No, what you just said is everything about what today is the day is about, because it's the one word covers the whole thing, and it's connection. We all just want to feel like we're connected, or that we belong is another word.
right.
And that's where I think that sometimes we don't know how to create those connections. We may be one of those introverts, right? There's lots of us who are extrovert introverts, or we kind of go between the two.
Right.
And then there are some that are just introverts, and they don't know how to communicate that they need that connection. And that's why I like to ask this question, because I want to empower people to feel like no matter what age you are, you still want to feel connected.
So I think one thing that you have to also remember, Jody, is that you can't hide behind, and I'm not using that sarcastically, being an introvert. Introvert and extrovert have different ways of communicating, different levels of passion or energy or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that as an introvert, you don't have real, honest, and empowering conversations. It just means that instead of having them in a room full of 400 people, that you might have them with 4. My daughter is very much more quiet. Sometimes I come in and she's like, she needs a break from me when I'm visiting her. She's still in Chicago, but she's truly loves peace and quiet and a handful of really great friends. But so she has a different communication style, but doesn't mean she doesn't communicate. Doesn't mean she doesn't have a network of people who can help her when she needs it and who she will help when they need it. So it may be a matter of quantity. It may be a matter of the energy that you bring to it. Some people are quieter, more, moderate in their approach, but everybody does communicate. It's what are you communicating? And when you read all these studies done about what makes people happy, Finland is the happiest place on earth. Why is that the happiest country? Over and over again, because of the social connections, because people feel that they're not alone. And when you boil that down or drill down to individuals, the one thing that most people who say they are happy, identify as being happy, all have in common is meaningful relationships. It could be one, it could be 100 to 1, it could be, I know 5,000 people, which wouldn't make much sense, but if it was, but at the same time, it's that relationship that gives your life meaning. And people who don't have relationships struggle much more. And again, you don't have to have many. Sometimes the people say, you have one good friend, you've got it made, right? But you need that one good friend. And it's very hard to go it alone and feel happy. And I think that's where marketing comes in too. People who engage with someone else and make that and have that expression that are able to communicate that you are not alone and I'd like to help you.
Great points. Thank you for sharing that. I want to turn this a little bit to your incredible nonprofit work. Talk about connection and connecting and all the things that you're doing to help not-for-profits. Where did your passion for working with nonprofits start?
So I'm going to guess by now, after knowing me several years and spending 30 minutes in this conversation, you're going to know the name that's going to come out of my mouth, and I can't help it. It's just the reality of life. but my father was very actively involved in the community. So there's a group called B'nai B'rith. It's a men's club, was very popular on the South Side. And he was president at one point, treasurer, of course. He was an accountant, so you get typecast, and he ended up as treasurer. And also events planner, because he used to take me some of the events in the evening when children were welcome. He was also the president of the temple board, and other various groups. In fact, when my mother was really angry with me, which again didn't happen, and neither of them, I was an only child, they didn't either of them get very angry very often, but she would say to me, "You are just like your father. Every time I turn around, you're joining another group." And I would say, "Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm so glad that you said that." That came close to he's losing his mind and me saying, "I hope I find it first." I mean, that was always, if it's somewhere, I want it, but he was very active and very actively involved. And that set a tone for me that I just assumed that that's how you give back into the community. I've had the good fortune that at Sobelco, about 20% of our client base is nonprofit anyway. So while I've always been involved with one-offs, or my mom had Alzheimer's, so Alzheimer's Association at a very young age, I lost a sister. I was an only child most of my life, but she had childhood leukemia. So leukemia research became, a place you just sort of had an emotional connection to various organizations. But at Sobelco, the door has been open to a far greater, wider breadth. And as we penetrated that market on behalf of the firm, I had the opportunity to meet so many people. So I'm there encouraging people to understand how much value Sobel offers to the nonprofit community, to our clients. But I'm also there and I get to benefit from that as well. So when you're sitting at a board meeting, or when you're helping with a strategic retreat, or helping an organization, one of our clients just called and said they're having an anniversary this year. I think it's 40 years, and they wanted to do some exciting things. Would I brainstorm with them on some of the things that they could be doing? So of course I said, sure. And we set up a Zoom meeting to do that, because you see what everyone else is doing and you can share that. This is what's worked elsewhere when someone's had an anniversary. This is the kind of activities that take place that shine the spotlight on you and help you leverage that anniversary to the good of the organization. So I do get a chance. I can't sit on a board if we do the audit. There's certain principles and ethics that you have to abide by, so that you're independent as an auditor and not helping an organization make decisions. But I can add value and sit on committees, and often it's just a phone call. Or someone will call and say, "I'm looking for a board member. We have an empty seat right now. Our bylaws call for 20. We have 19. And the person who left was an attorney. I'm looking for a lawyer who might be wanting to sit on our board. We help abused women." And I'll say, "Oh, maybe I know somebody," and I will give 3 or 4 names, and they'll call back and say, "Oh, you know what, that worked. And 2 of the people you recommended are now sitting on our board." I love that. I love when someone calls me and says, "Oh my God, you introduced me to this great group, and now I'm on their board." And I know that they may not have known them, but for my introducing them. So I'm thrilled to do that. And it takes on a life of its own.
It does. I say I'm a serial connector, and I know you are as well.
I love that
Which is a good,
expression. Yes.
yeah, it's a good one. It's definitely something that you get so much from watching it all happen. You just kind of set the stage, and then they take it away and do what they need to do, and just wonderful to watch from.
It
And
is.
with Changemakers, it's been international, so that's been really interesting to see, and
Yeah.
it's been fun to manage time zones.
Yeah. Especially the 6-hour ones, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Pam 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products. Products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Softkin, support organization for kids in need. Pam 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information.
Looking at you're in the for-profit world. You've worked so much with the nonprofits, and we both do a lot of work with NJBIA. And one of the main things is working to bridge the gap between those two industries. And in your opinion, I'd really love to know, what do you think they need to do better together?
So I thank you for asking. I think it's a great question. And I also think that it's changed. There was a time, certainly when I was growing up, where nonprofits, and it's certainly not even completely changed everywhere, always felt like they had that tin cup, right? Dennis Miller, the consultant in the nonprofit space, uses that tin cup word a lot, in terms of how you almost feel like you're begging, right? And nonprofits, because of the name, I mean, I wish that whoever created the nonprofit community brand had said some other word first, because no matter what clever expression comes up, it always goes back to nonprofit anyway. You do make a profit. You pay rent, you pay staff, you pay for services, you pay utilities, you buy paper and a water cooler. I mean, there's no such thing as nonprofit. What it means is that when you are collecting money from the public domain, that money is earmarked and going toward a mission and the upkeep of the organization to accomplish that mission. And at the same time, the shareholders don't gain. The money goes right back in, is reinvested again in the mission. So if you have a corporation, at the end of the year, you pass out dividends. You have a nonprofit, you're continuously reinvesting in the nonprofit, but that doesn't mean there's no money. I mean, how in the world would you pay it? You buy a box of Girl Scout cookies. I mean, not even picking on them. It's just a great example. I love Thin Mints. So anybody wants to send Thin Mints, that's my favorite. Samoas are pretty good too, right? But
Oh,
I
yes.
was a Girl Scout. My mother would have them stacked up in the garage, as you know, the parents would come and pick up the orders and what have you. So everybody loves Girl Scout cookies, and I do too. My mother was actually a Girl Scout leader, so everybody likes Girl Scout leaders, and I do too. But at the same time, preparing that box of cookies does not cost whatever they cost today. I'm going to say $4. I have no idea. So it's not $4, right? And the reason you're paying more for that cookie is because someone has to buy the box, someone has to have the cellophane, someone has to pay for the cookie to be baked, someone has to ship the cookies. Nothing is, bare bones. We see donors saying, I want these to be restricted funds. I want 100% of my $5 to go to the Girl Scouts. Well, that's great, except that those cookie sales help the Girl Scouts, even if all $5 doesn't go to them, even if it's $1 that goes. You have to understand, you wouldn't have the dollar if you hadn't spent $4 to get the product. So I think what has to happen between nonprofit and for-profit, true understanding of how a nonprofit is nothing more than another small business, paying attention to what it does with the money that's generated. And at the same time, that it's an investment. And I think that our successor generations, the baby boomers, weren't as good at this, I don't think, as much, but the Xers and the millennials and those coming behind them are more aware that when you are making that donation, it is an investment in that group. And I think we need to move away from that. And some people have done a great job already, and some don't, of moving away from the tin cup theory and saying, please give, won't you please contribute, won't you please help us, as opposed to invest in this because it's good for you and good for us as well. And I think that's when the nonprofit and the for-profit really intersect, is when the for-profit corporation realizes, it actually helps me as a business to be investing in this organization, whether I'm investing in the Great Swamp at Watershed Association and ensuring that my children and myself and whoever is drinking clean water, or that when we walk through the forest preserves, it's not loaded with trash, right? It's an investment in your good, good life, to make sure the water's clean. You are giving to the Great Swamp, but it's giving for a purpose. And I think that you sometimes get lost. We use the words give and we use the words contribute. And then, of course, when you're getting starting a career and getting your first job, you're looking at benefits and salary, not overall the first thing. Clearly, everybody looking for a job has to be compensated, but mostly it is about, will I add value, and who will I report to, and what is that culture going to be like? Will I be rewarded appropriately? So there are other things to look at, but when you're looking for a job in a nonprofit, you already go in with a preconceived notion, I'm not going to be paid as well. If I worked at, in the front office of ADP, I'm going to make a lot more money than if I'm working at, the arts center. And so there's a sense that you're already in a lesser category. That has to change. If you're
Yes.
giving your time to leukemia research, if you're giving your time to the Newark Arts Museum, if you're giving your time to whatever organization that is, BIA is a business and a trade organization, but nonetheless an organization, if you're giving your time like that, your staff, not a volunteer, there's a difference. And volunteers, again, in the corporate world, you don't have volunteer workers, you have staff, even interns are paid, they're not volunteers. And so you get away from that sense of giving and getting without compensation. You have to move away from that and treat nonprofits like the social services organizations they are. And they have to make money and have to have a profit. Yes, there's a limit. The IRS is watching over you, that you're not making, that your CEO is, if your CEO is making $500,000 a year, the same equivalent as, somebody at a fabulously successful for-profit, and there's a good reason and there's justification, and that nonprofit is doing amazing good worldwide, but the CEO's part of that package and making that happen is that, you got the CEO from Starbucks decided to start a nonprofit. Let's pretend that hasn't happened, but let's say it did. And he may have she may have a very impressive draw as a result. But if they can make that organization serve the community in the way that Starbucks has turned to serve the corporate world, then that money becomes worth it. You just have to get away from the sense of the starving artist and the starving nonprofit, and please give, and no gift is too small, please give us $10. All of that is true, but it can't be, it isn't a reasonable formula for success. And Linda Zippo is the president of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, has been for a very long time one of the most well-known voices and well-spoken leaders in the state and really around the country. And she says all the time, you cannot do more with less. There's no such thing. And you cannot say 100% of my gift must go to this. You picture a grill, you say, I'm paying $5 for the hamburger, but you've not paid for the charcoal or the bun or the ketchup or the person who's flipping that hamburger, right? You just want to pay for the hamburger, and the hamburger is 2 cents and the bun is a nickel or whatever. And that's what you want to pay. You can't. And it just doesn't work that way. So the more professionally the nonprofit leadership behaves, the more they understand their own financial statement, their own budget, their cash flow analysis, the more they act and behave and support the for-profit corporate type attitude and atmosphere, the more trust and the more opportunities the for-profit world will find to interact. It's not like you're just being a good sport, you're being a good Samaritan, you're giving away your money. That may never disappear completely, and that's great. If you want to, if you're helping the Salvation Army on a winter's day and you walk by and put $1 in there, or the poppy, they were selling poppies last week, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. It was great to see that. They're the age of my dad would have been, and happy to sell it, to support that. But there has to be an investment. Where did that dollar go? What did you do with that dollar? How did you use that to benefit others? What is happening in the veterans world? So if you don't act like a business thinking, forward thinking, strategic thinking organization, you can't attract the people that do think like that, who want to know. And with the global world now, there was a time when you had your own community, right? Your church or your temple or your college or if you went to a private house, whatever, your neighborhood is where your money stayed. Today, you turn on the news and you see a tsunami in Japan or an earthquake in South America, and people are living without water and supplies. You're racing to help, right? So the world is big and small at the same time.
Yes.
And the opportunities for giving are much greater. So you need to be able to convince your neighbors that investing in you and your organization is really important to the community. And when mental health is supported and people are not homeless and sitting on the street and you have to walk around people as you're shopping, it's all to everyone's advantage to keep the standards of living really high. And that's the way to do it, is for those two groups to come together.
Simon Sinek, and I say this all the time, he came up with For Impact. The sector should be called the For Impact sector. And I am on this mission. I say it almost in whenever I talk nonprofit, that is, or when I put out a post, I always put For Impact in parentheses when I say not for profit, because I do agree with you. Right away, the person thinks, that someone's hand, our
Right,
hand
getting
is
hit up.
out. Yeah. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that I've heard him say that. And when I prefaced my remarks, when I started and said, no matter what new name comes up, it never sticks. It's because of that. I mean, you get someone like Simon Sinek with a global platform, and he's well respected and well listened to, and it's not catching. It catches with you, it catches, but it doesn't catch, right? And it seems to be so ingrained, but unfortunately it influences the way you think, how we speak, what we say, what titles we use for people impact the way we see them in our heads. It's a shortcut. It's a heuristic, right? As soon as you hear nonprofit, you know in your head what that means. And if someone said for impact or social services or mental health associations, whatever narrow or broadly defined words you use, it doesn't take the place of a word that's been in the community for however many decades it's been there. And the ability to say nonprofit and for-profit is just so clean and neat, even though it doesn't work, that people don't let go of it. And he's 100% right, and you're 100% right. And maybe if enough people push it, it will be. But I know Linda Zippo's used other words as well, and they just, it just doesn't catch.
It doesn't. And I know. And I, like I said, I'm on a mission. I'm just going to, even if I change 5 people, or we all come band together to try to change it, it's at least the little steps that we can take. And the other thing that I just want to bring up before I go to my next question too is that as somebody who's a CEO of a not-for-profit myself, when you're writing grants or you're doing certain things, salaries are a no-no, right? You're supposed to, there's this awful mindset that whether you're leading the organization in development in whatever your title is or role is, it should be volunteer. You know how many times when I worked for American Heart or American Lung, they said, well, you're volunteer for them, right? You don't get paid for this. This is not a paid position. And you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. How could you think that this is not, how would I survive? And I don't know where it came about, where people think like, well, if you're in that sector, you don't either deserve to be paid or need to be paid, but how do you keep the lights on and food on the table? And I don't know how we change this, because even in the grant writing process, this is still a problem. You cannot include administrative as a line.
William Patterson had a program, and they were telling seniors about different opportunities in the workplace. And one of the little sectors was going to be nonprofit, and they asked me to speak. And the first thing one of the students asked, said, fire away, ask whatever you want. And the first thing that person said was, will I make a competitive salary? Mm-hmm. And I said, I can tell you that great organizations do pay competitively. I can also tell you that if it's just like even working for a for-profit or nonprofit, you have to have a passion for what that group is trying to accomplish. And that is in some ways also compensation, but it doesn't pay your bills. And it absolutely isn't the stepping stone that you need as a career person entering a career. So the nonprofits have to pay as well. They do. They can't afford to have it both ways. You can't say, don't call us nonprofit, we are a small business, and then say, I'm not going to pay. If small business doesn't pay what a larger company pays, perhaps, and sometimes they pay more depending on the opportunity, depending on what you learn, the tangibles and the intangibles of the career and the job. You can't hide behind or use as an excuse, we do good, and so we don't have to pay. It is a job, and you want the best and the brightest. And like every other aspect of nonprofits and for-profits, they have different ways of achieving their goals, but they have to have some things in common. And if you want young people coming out, like you're saying, working 60, 70 hours a week and thinking that you could do that as a volunteer, there are volunteer jobs to be had, and those are wonderful if you do those in addition to trying to pay your rent and your food and whatever. But you can't afford to not have a job that does. And that was something that came out at that William Patterson graduate conversation, was that as they're coming out of school, they're going to need jobs at school loans to pay off and other things. And if you want to attract really great people in the nonprofit space, you're going to have to pay to get them any more than a small business would. I'm not saying you have to be J&J or, roll out the gold standard benefits. There are things that are partly for pay and partly that are just feel good benefits. Like maybe someone wanted to bring their dog to work or ride their bike or have Tuesdays off. In the days before COVID, where some of that flexibility mattered, the nonprofits could leverage that and say, well, we can be more flexible perhaps, but you have to ultimately pay your bills, and you ultimately need to be paid for your job, for your work.
And I just want to preface that also, that what that means is that the funders who are willing to fund your organization need to allow you to have a line item in your grant writing or in what, as part of it, that says that administrative costs matter. And I honestly, Sally, that's been the hardest part when it comes to salary, is that if you can't put it in a grant because there's no place for it, and they're very specific about how much of that dollar is going to fund that specific program, and there's no item for admin cost, it becomes a vicious cycle, because how are you going to pay for the staff if you're not getting the funding?
It's 100% correct. And what would have to happen, I believe, going forward is an evolution, if not a revolution. And people like Linda Zippo and the Centers for Nonprofit that advocate on behalf of their organizations in their states and others as well, whether that's, our elected officials, they need to be able to make the case that you have to change people's mind. They can't think it's a bad thing to pay a great leader a great salary and have this organization flourish. I mean, you can't have it every which way. Nobody works on a shoestring budget. Rarely does anybody work on a shoestring budget and accomplish miracles. And if you want the sector to and so much of the government so many government organizations have stepped back and thrust the nonprofit into the space that they once occupied, whether that's mental health or other areas. Those were things that they were governmental gifts, or if not gifts, they were certainly governmental services. When you talk about Finland being happy and saying, well, they have a social network and they can go and get help, and you can't here perhaps, then you're saying, well, where do you get help? Well, the Morris County, Mental Health Association. Bob Davis has to answer that question for you. Well, he can't answer that and not have a staff that's addressing mental health issues besides just running the organization. These are professionals. When there's a great resignation area, the nonprofits that had hundreds of people working on their staff that have now lost them, or it's being rearranged or reworked, it's a nightmare.
It is. It really is. So thank you for that. I don't think we're going to solve the problem today, but with someone like yourself, and your passion and talking to people and working with the nonprofits, we have some hope that it can happen here in New Jersey.
We do.
So thank you. And two more quick questions. And one, I want to come full circle. Connection has changed now that we're in this space, and connecting with people the old way is very different. We're in this whole new, whether like this is being done through Zoom podcasts. A lot of times people came in to recording studios to do podcasts. That doesn't happen anymore. Not for the most part. There's still some of that. But when asking the question is how do you see effective connection working now? And how can people who struggle with creating that do a better job of it? And I just want to preface one last thing on this, because I know I keep getting hit up on LinkedIn with, I have the next best thing that you need, and I don't even know who that person is. So I know I asked you a very large question, so I'm sure there's a big answer.
One of my pet peeves is when someone calls and says, I see you're connected to Jody, and I'd love an introduction. And I say, I don't know Jody, but somewhere along the line, you must, it wouldn't be you, obviously, would send me and I say, I saw you at an event. Can we connect? And I've just said yes out of lack of knowing how to say no. And the next thing I know, it looks as if we're connected and we're not, or we're connected, but I don't really have an affinity to know much about you or able to help in any way. So you need to be a little more discreet or careful about what you're connecting to, whether it's online or in person. If you gave me your business card at an event and went home and called me back 2 days later and said, oh, you and I are great buddies now, and I need some help from you, I'd be like, I barely knew you. We exchanged cards. Clicking yes when someone sends you a LinkedIn invitation is very much like barely knowing someone at an event and taking their card. It's still a connection. And I think that's the thing we have to remember is technology is definitely creating a different platform. But at the end of the day, it's people. It's people connecting to people, whether it was in the 1970s, whether it was in the 1670s, and whether it's in 2022. The basic concept is the exact same. I've met you. I may have met you on Zoom. It isn't as easy to meet you. It's very helpful. Even Zoom or any other platform is helpful if it's an existing relationship. I can call you, make a point of making sure that I talk to you at least once a month, or every other week and say, Jody, I haven't talked to you in a while. How's it going? Do you need anything over? I'm coming to the BIA nonprofit program. What else are you doing? I'm looking forward to your international conference, all the good things, right? That can be done when I've already known you. Getting a chance to meet someone new is harder when it's not in person, when you don't have the opportunity to just casually chat and say, wait, I didn't know you used to live in Chicago. Oh yeah, I went to Bowen High School. Oh my God, I went to Bowen High School. So you don't have that interaction as much online as you would standing and talking to someone in person. But what you can do is, if you're keeping up your relationships that you've already built, ask those people, who do you know? Just like we said earlier, how do you find the right boss? How do you find the right organization to work for? It's by asking other people who you love and trust. And so if you've built that nice network, you can use that during COVID, during any time at all, to say, look, we're all in the same boat. I'm not going to meet you at a 200-person Sober Women's leadership program anymore, although those were wonderful. But I would like to know who you think might enjoy the program online. Do you have any names of people who I should reach out to include them in my mailing list? So I think you have to be a little more creative about asking for help and acknowledging that you may not be able to open those doors on your own anymore, or for now, but you do have ways of getting connections and getting introductions. And you have to use leverage the people you do know and offer to do the same in return. I said someone today, I think that you would really enjoy meeting, and I'm going to make sure that I, make that happen. And when you have the chance, do the same for me always. So I think you have to recognize I'm maybe not going to be at a 200-person breakfast with any great regularity, or, as this thing becomes more endemic and less pandemic, maybe we will be back to 200 people lunches or breakfasts or whatever it may be. And we will have some opportunities to open new doors and start new friendships. But the ones you already have are really valuable. So just use them wisely.
Absolutely. You don't know who the person you're talking to knows. Like, I know that you have a huge amount of people behind you, right? That support you. You're beloved by so many, and you have so many different connections. But my goal isn't to just take them from you. Like, my whole part of this process is to get closer to get to know you. I learned a lot about you today, which I have to say I'm just so thrilled, because I didn't realize we had the dad connection.
How would you know?
Right. And that is so meaningful to me. And then you have just openly, without me in many cases saying, hey, do you know this person? You have said to me, I think you need to meet this person. And I can say, you know what, Sally really has all the answers on that. And that comes natural when you feel the trust, going back to that word.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have to be in the family. It could be the family you create.
That's correct. Absolutely.
So my last question for you, and I could talk to you for 10 hours, Sally, is what is the footprint that you're creating right now that you want to leave behind?
It's such a wonderful question to ask, a footprint, and what are you leaving behind? I had the chance before COVID to address a panel at St. Vincent's Academy in Newark during Women's History Month in March, several years ago. And I had 4 panelists, and I asked them each to prepare, as they were going through when we closed, to say one thing that they wanted to be known for. And usually we certainly encourage women, especially young women, to be bold, to be risk takers, to be entrepreneurs, whatever. And the very last person said, I want to be known for being kind. And I thought, what a pity that was the last. That was, wait, the others all made sense. But being kind, that just really, really resonated with me. I would like people to say, I was helpful, I put them first, or I thought of them, with consistency in a way to help and add value. And then I was kind. I think that would be good enough.
And you are very, very kind. You don't, and that's the thing, is you don't ever have an agenda. And I feel like when you don't have your own ego, right, in the way, and you're there to be supportive, there's so many more things that can happen. So much, the connections are greater.
I could never be in sales. My title might be Chief Growth Strategist, but I could not come after everyone I meet and say, it's great to meet you. I think that Sob would be a wonderful auditor for you. If that was my goal, I would be miserable at my job and I would be asked out the door. My goal is to see what do you need and how can I help you? And ultimately over time, like in the book Givers and Takers, is that Adam Grant wrote that book? It's a wonderful book, Givers and Takers.
Okay.
Eventually the more you give, the more you ultimately get. And that's not even your own agenda. Your agenda is to give. And it just happens that you get as a result.
I can honestly raise my hand and say that this is a gift. This podcast became a gift, and it just happened all by itself, I feel like. So I totally get what you're saying. One guest led me to another, and you and I know each other for some
A very
time
long
now.
time.
Yeah. Started with the Heart Association back in
It did.
2000. And it's so funny because I started at the Heart Association in 2005. We didn't meet until probably 2007 maybe, but it's just so
I
funny.
had come to one of the luncheons and then I immediately had said to June Mahone, I would love to chair the Garden State, the one that was at the Palace, and I would love to chair that. And we use the Sober Women's Breakfast as a way to recruit people to be on the committee and help with the silent auction. And it was just so wonderfully done. Such an important thing. Who would know that in 2020, I would have open heart surgery? I mean, didn't know that, right? I had no way of knowing when I was busy trying to drive attention and support for the Heart Association that I would have a heart issue.
No.
And I'm fine, but it's great.
Right. But you were educated too by being part of that.
100%. So.
And that is a whole episode onto itself,
Yes.
to, for women to be educated.
On
and
a number of things.
Oh, yes. A number of things for sure. And health and taking better care of ourselves, right? We do that a lot. What do they say about the oxygen mask, right? We have to put it on first.
Can't help anybody if you're not okay.
Anything else before we go that you'd like to share?
I would just say thank you. Thank you to you for giving me a chance to talk. My daughter-in-law has a very heavy Romanian accent. She's Romanian and she teases me and she always says, here's, in a loving way, she always goes, taka, 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 taka. So I do love to talk and I love to share and I appreciate you giving me the chance to do that.
Oh, anytime. And I love to listen. I love to talk too sometimes, believe me. So you and I have a lot in common.
I think that that extrovert personality kind of lends itself to that. I have so much I can't wait to tell you.
Yeah, and that's that excitement about life, right? And those are the people you want, as we were talking to about connection, you want to find those people that have that same zest. If that's who you are, connect with those people because they just lift you. It's incredible. Like I'll walk away from this conversation and I'll feel like my feet won't touch the ground because we had such a good conversation.
So glad I contributed to that. And you did the same for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to say what I always say before, but first I want to thank Sally Glick for sharing her heart and her stories and her insight today. So thank you so much, Sally.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm going to share what I share at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what step, small or large, are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Have a great week, everyone. Bye, Sally.
Bye-bye.